Anybody have a preference?
I think it's fine just the way that it is. I think if there's abuse of any financial accounts, the news would be getting a hold of it. And over my lifetime in Havre, I don't ever remember hearing anything like that happening at the public school level. So I don't know if we need to do a bunch of changing. And what I see right there, I don't have a problem with.
I guess I would be in support of, some sort of language that it either puts an $80,000 threshold on the student accounts or just says that there's no threshold. Because again, that $80,000 requirement will kick in anyways. But then I guess I would like to see that investment funds. So we are specifically talking about our investment funds do require board approval from, withdrawing from those accounts. So that they're not being used for basically operating expenses.
Right, right. And I think that piece, since it's under that independent investment account, Kristen, like you're talking about, then that kind of covers your piece there. And then if you wanted to have a clarifying state of maybe district, was that where you were kind of thinking like a district funds and then
Yeah, just so it doesn't get confused with the student accounts. I don't know if that's how you guys would phrase it, but
mhm,
I was just trying to think of wording that would differentiate it from the
mhm.
student accounts.
Well, you could phrase it that way and then it could be sent to MTSBA to have them review it. See if there's a different verbiage that would be the better. Or if that would be the best way to do it. They might have a thought on it or have seen different options that school districts have done.
Mhm.
So, um, with that, you guys can make a motion either way. But if there's no other thoughts or things that we need to discuss, we could definitely make a motion and then come back for our second reading and see if we need to change language on it.
One thought, if you want to, you could make a motion to approve the language within this policy, and then like we do sometimes in the past, pending a revise from MTSBA on language in this policy, so that kind of fits what we're looking at. And so then I can take the write-up I have here and send it to legal, and then just, kind of get the feedback from them if they want to wordsmith it a little bit to how it fits, and I'll give them kind of the direction that you're looking for. And then when it comes back next month, we'll have kind of the recommended from them on how they would approach that, and just kind of give them the scenario. So maybe approval on first reading pending MTSBA's recommendation or something like that.
So I, looking into the crystal ball, since we know student accounts are going to be presented as an individual investment, should we just send it to MTSBA to ask how to do that now and then just have, I mean, unless someone's got correct verbiage for this, it might make more sense to just make a motion to have this plus the possibility of student investments reviewed by MTSBA, because maybe we just need a separate student investment policy since it's all new to us, and ask them rather than approve something, because there's not really a rush, I don't think, to get this verbiage in. There's no legal ramification, I think. I mean,
You could even
I think
table it
everybody's
if you
on
want.
board that we're not
Yeah.
like moving large amounts, and if we were to, we would probably
Sure.
be notified of it at least.
Sure.
So I guess,
I would almost be in favor of tabling it then.
Yeah.
And waiting to hear back
Yes.
from MTSBA, because they
Yep.
might have some things like if you don't put a threshold, here are some concerns we have that maybe they've seen that they would caution us against.
That sounds perfect.
Okay. Everybody aware of all the options? With all that being said, I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I would move that we table item D1 pending input from MTSBA Legal Services.
Is there a second? All those in favor, raise your hand. Motion passes unanimous. Well, that was a long discussion and I don't know, we got a whole lot accomplished. MHSA annual meeting proposals.
Yep. I recommend that Mark Irvin cast the vote for Havre Public Schools at the MHSA annual meeting in January as presented. So Mark's going to come down tonight and he's got a copy of the proposals and he'll just kind of talk through the direction on where they're going. So with that being said, Mark?
All right, thank you. I did have some walk-up music ready, but Kyle played it at the beginning of the meeting instead of waiting for me, so I'll just walk up there and we'll get started. I laid out a sheet of paper there for you that has the 6 proposed amendments for this year's annual meeting. The annual meeting is the meeting where all high schools go and represent to talk about all of the interscholastic events that we have and activities that we have in the state here. And everybody is a voting member. Every school is a voting member. So I would just say that. It's on Monday, so I'll be heading to Billings on Sunday. We have some meetings Sunday afternoon, and then the primary meeting is on Monday. So what I will try to do is, because not a lot of proposals to talk about this year, but there is quite a bit of language change on a couple of them. So I will try to be as brief and concise as I can. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. And then I'll explain kind of the reason I'm voting a specific way as far as how I think it best represents Havre. So the first one there was a proposal made by Sunburst, North Toole County, a proposal to amend students below 9th grade bylaw. Well, that's the 8th grade participation rule is what that means. Okay. So the way the wording with the 8th grade participation rule is, and it's somewhat vague, and it was done purposefully by MHSA to give districts more autonomy in how they're going to proceed with the 8th grade rule, which I'm sure all of you remember that. And as we went through that process, the language change that is being proposed is one that just says they would like to cross out, it's part F of section 5, which is students below 9th grade participating 8th grade. It just says all 8th grade students participating in a high school contest must adhere to all other MHSA rules and guidelines. And then there's a section that says committed to a contest at the high school level, the 8th grade student may not also participate in that same sport at a level under high school concurrently. So the proposal is to just X that last sentence out, the committed to a contest part. The rationale is that it's illogical that 8th graders be permitted to engage in different sports concurrently, and then to say that and then to prohibit from participation in the same sport at the same time. So that's upon districts to decide. That's more of a, honestly, it affects smaller schools more than us. Right now, the way we do it, we have our 8th grade participation. We don't run anything concurrently. If you've committed to a sport at the high school level, and we do have a few 8th graders that have participated and are currently participating in a high school sport, they are not concurrently participating in a middle school sport right now. I would vote no on that. And I can see that there might be a language change. I don't think that there will be. I would suggest that they just say that no 8th grade students can concurrently compete at a high school and a middle school level. For us, we don't need to do that. Part of the reason I want, or that we do it that way, is because you need to commit to the sport that you're in at that time, mostly for practices. I mean, it's hard to do both. We practice at the same times a lot of the time. And the other thing would be, you're talking about a young person and a potential overuse injury. If they're competing at a high level in 2 different sports, to me, that's a high risk of injury. And we have enough of those anyway, just with the high level that we play at. So I don't see that as a reasonable thing. Now, other smaller schools, you know, like I said, the vagueness of the rule is kind of to allow districts to come up with their own eighth grade policy, how they do that. I think we have a pretty good working one right now that we've, discovered a few things now that we're in our second year with it, but I feel like we've done a pretty good job with it. And we do not do anything concurrently. And like I just kind of gave you the reason. So my vote on that would be no. Are there any questions on that particular piece? This first proposal? Okay. Well, the second one there, the proposal to amend the transfer rule by law. Okay, so what that is, we already have a transfer policy. This was actually submitted by Polson High School. The current language for that particular, the transfer policies, what they'd like to add into a particular sentence of the policy is one little change. A student who moves into a new district or school attendance area upon a corresponding change of residence by the parent or legal guardian with whom the student was living during his or her previous school enrollment. And then there's a lot more to it than that, but here's where the new piece comes in. This is the added piece. However, if the move is within a 50-mile radius, then the MHSA transfer rule applies. So that is the new piece. What they're trying to say is any new residents move to, say, another residence, if it's within a 50-mile radius of the previous school, then the transfer rule would come under question. Right now, the rule is if a family moves out of district into another attendance area, you're automatically eligible for varsity participation if you can prove there's a residency change and there's an address change or some other things that go with that. The rationale behind that, which was going to be put forth, is that I'll find it here where I put it. It's a very lengthy rationale, but mostly it was just trying to say there's some ambiguity with that, and they feel like there are some places where there's not a good established new residence. Like you might be just living with another family member within the area. Just we have communities that are 10 miles apart or 15 miles apart. And I would say at times that probably has happened. I don't like the rule. I would vote no on it. I believe the transfer rule is already pretty concise. And what I don't like about that is even where we live, if I had a family that had a job situation or a house became available, say from Chinook and came into Havre, and it's legitimate and it's a job and they rent a house or they buy a home in Havre, I don't want them to come under the scrutiny of a transfer rule because that's very legitimate, but it's a 22-mile rate, it's not 50 miles. And I think that's or unfair to the legitimate transfers and moves.
Mhm.
And this would target them to have to fall under the transfer rule and have to be investigated under that. When clearly we have quite a bit in place already to try to ensure that there isn't unfair and unequitable transfers and play going on where teams are trying to stack teams and invite other kids in. Now, has it happened in the past? It has, but there's been a lot of transfer policy put in to help eliminate a lot of that. But I think in this particular case, I worry about it going against the actual legitimate situation. Because that happens. We have a lot of communities, look on the High Line, how close they are. And people with housing situations the way they are, that's the one thing that would worry me because there are people that have to move into other communities, find a place to live in or for jobs. So I'd hate to see those families penalized on that one. So my thought on that is there's enough in place. I'd vote no on that one. That's what I'm thinking on that one. So is there any questions on that? Try to explain it fairly clearly. Okay. Well, those are the only two proposals being brought forth by schools. The other four are brought forth by the MHS Executive Board. And these are going to be language changes in policy. So the first one there is the proposal to amend the award rule by law. So fine here. That one is a little bit different. It's a lot of language change, but it's very specific on what its purpose is. So I'll go over that. Right now, as part of the award rule, there's language in there that says it's an event that is defined as a sports camp, an individual tournament, a post-season recognition function such as a sports banquet or a fundraising or similar type of event. And any kind of event, a student athlete in any particular school cannot receive any kind of award over $100 of a monetary value. So what happens is there's a lot of confusion over what that event is. And I just explained what they actually mean. It's supposed to be, like I said, either a sports banquet or a fundraiser or a camp. And kids who work camps, a lot of times if they're a student athlete, will get a t-shirt or whatever. That does not obviously go over $100. Be a pretty fancy t-shirt if it did. What they're looking at changing is just taking that language out and saying that all students who participate in these kinds of events, and they want to just take out the specifics of it because it gets kind of convoluted, and they want just a $500 limit for the entire sports year rather than a $100 limit per event, which kids are not going to receive, and it can be can't be money. It has to be just a monetary value, things that are given. T-shirts is probably the best example of something like that. So what they're trying to do is just make it a little bit easier to understand what that means. And then rather than base it on each individual event, just make it a monetary total value, not to exceed more than $500 in total value of any kinds of awards that might be given at multiple events. It doesn't happen. We don't give a lot out. Most of our teams, if they do something, they fundraise, or they buy their own stuff, or we buy it and provide it, and then we collect it. So we're very careful about that. And the nice thing is it doesn't count towards the $500 if it's a plaque or a certificate or any kind of award that way that they might receive at one of our sports banquets. That's separate and it's not counted into it. This has never been a problem for us. I mean, we've never gone over what the original award rule is, but this would just make it where very easy to track. I mean, we're not going to go over the $500. We just wouldn't. But it also opens up a little bit that if we had a team who won a state championship and our booster club wanted to celebrate them by buying them a nice long sleeve t-shirt that said state champions or whatever, they would be able to do that, not be penalized. The caveat would be that we would do that for every program that could potentially win a state champion so that we would still follow Title IX and Ridgeway rules. So that's all of that is. There's quite a bit of language change to it, but that's what the nutshell is, I guess. Are there any questions on that? This is something that I don't see not passing by a landslide. I have no problem with it. Like I said, it kind of condenses things. It takes a little bit of the eliminates some language that gets confusing to people, I guess, is their main purpose. That was the rationale. So. Any questions on that one? Okay. The fourth one there, the proposal to amend the amateur rule. Okay, that's kind of an interesting one. I'm sure that you have all heard at the college level now, the term NIL, which is name, image, likeness. So that has trickled down into the high school level, I guess I would say. So amateurs cannot be paid for whatever they're participating in. You lose your amateur status. What this is trying to state is that they are not going to, what the state of Montana would like to do is go ahead and pass a series of language or a set of language that would be included in the current amateur rule that states that there's not going to be a penalty if there is a student athlete at a particular school that takes advantage of name, image, or likeness to make some money or do something. The only thing is that it cannot be tied to their program, their team, or their high school that they represent, or anything MHSA related. It has to be completely separate of that. So if they're in, let's say we have a student who's a very popular high school quarterback that's going to play, for the University of Notre Dame or Georgia or something, and they're very popular, and there are local communities that want to feature them in a Ford pickup commercial or whatever. They're allowed to do that, but they could not wear a Blue Pony jersey or anything school related. pictures could not be taken inside of our gym or inside of our football stadium, that kind of thing. Okay. What it is, they just see that as there are kids around 38 states actually now have this in their language. So part of it is just for a consistency piece for the state of Montana to kind of move in. Is it going to affect us as much as it would kids in Texas or Florida or something? No, because there are kids that are so highly recruited coming out of some of those states that they're already celebrities. So they've already actually been using some of this. So this is just language to let them know that the NIL has to be completely separate from the school. But in doing so, then it does not affect their amateur status. You know, whereas if we had a 17-year-old who got signed to play minor league baseball or something, we don't offer baseball, but if we did, and then they went and competed or got a signing bonus, well, that would take away their amateur status. We don't have we'd be very careful with that situation, not to put a kid in that, you know, particular situation, but with the NIL, because it's something that's just out there now, this is a way for kids to maybe have that opportunity, but it will not affect their amateur status or get us in any kind of trouble. So it's coming. If it doesn't change this year, it will eventually. I think it'll pass. So I have no problem with that. It's not something that's probably going to affect us. And I actually made a call on it because I was wondering how prevalent it was, and it's not. But I talked to some MHSA folks, and they told me that students that have actually, high school kids that have been or have received some NIL money, it's usually less than $100. So it's not that big yet, but it's coming. So anyway, I don't think it's anything we have to worry about too much. I'm in favor. It's just language change to protect the amateur status. So, any questions on that? Thought it was kind of interesting that it made its way into this year's meeting. Okay. I've had no offers for my NIL, so I'm going to have to just keep plugging away. Not pretty enough, but that's okay. So the next, we have the proposal to add general penalties. Okay, so this one has to do with fan sportsmanship. They've seen a rise, not just in our state, but throughout the country. And I'm sure you guys have seen different levels of it. And I mean, all the way down to Pee Wee baseball, where fans are getting asked to leave games because of their behavior. What this is talking about is trying to curb some of that by mandating a specific penalty against fans who have to be removed by administration with the by an official with the help of administration in a school. So when those things happen, they're not very fun because a game generally gets stopped and then you got to escort the person out. What they're looking at is making it a mandatory 3-game suspension for anybody that's removed due to unsportsmanlike behavior out of a contest. So if it was the last game at the end of a season, then that would follow them into the next sporting event. So you would serve a 3-game suspension. That would track them into, well, they would have to follow their kid into the next, whatever they do next, so that it's a penalty. And then the other part of that, if it happens a second time within a season or a sporting year, it's for the remainder of the season or the remainder of the year that they are suspended from coming to games. Part of the rationale on that was that Montana needs a consistent policy for fan ejections across the state. This would serve as a deterrent for fans and will promote better sportsmanship at all MHSA sanctioned events. The one thing that I disagreed with a little bit in the language was MHSA member schools may increase these minimum penalties at their discretion. I guess I would say and recommend that line be taken out simply because the rationale is that they want a consistent policy. So my thought is that makes it not consistent if everybody's doing something different. Sure. If we're going to do 3, then do 3. And then after that, if it's the remainder of the season or remainder of the year, I guess is actually how the language is, then it needs to be that way. And then what I'm also wondering, if it's at the end of a season, does that follow into the next year? So there's going to be a lot of questions on this one. I'm actually in favor of a little more policy with some more teeth to it, I would say. but I would like clarification on that. I'm in favor of voting yes if some of those things do get clarified. If not, then I wouldn't be in favor until the language is cleaned up a little bit. And I think that will come out from what I'm hearing. So
So
anyway,
one question on that. So if a fan is not a parent of a student and they get ejected from a boys basketball game, then does that apply to the next girls basketball game, or does it apply to the next boys basketball game for the next 3 consecutive games, for example?
right. And I'm glad you said that because that's another clarification. So is it game or is it event? Because
Yeah.
we have 4 games in
Right.
one day that go back to, and
Right.
so yeah, you could go to a C squad game at JV and 2 basketball varsity games. Yeah. So the way I'm reading is it would be next event day.
Okay.
But I would want, like I said, a little more clarification on that so that there is a consistent piece to it. So is that the next 3-day event days versus events? Yeah.
Okay.
So that is, I think that's a question that will come up just to clarify some of that language. And I'm going to go back and look at it a little more closely as I saw that, because yeah, it said if the ejection concurs with fewer than 3 games left in the season, in the team season, the suspension carries over to a school sports season, which immediately follows. Well, what happens is if it's, say, during a wrestling event, and then that, like you said, that kid doesn't do anything, or it's not a parent per se, they might not go to any track or tennis, or
Right.
you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
yeah, I kind of want to know how that follows them. I think that'll get cleaned up a little bit.
I would like to know how they're going to enforce that, how they, especially in some of these bigger schools. And I mean, just trying to keep track of somebody and how many games it's been, and who are they going to start posting pictures on the wall that says, do not allow this guy in? I mean,
Yeah, I don't
are they
think mug
gonna,
shots are gonna end up on the, as a banner or
Yeah.
something. That's
I
a
don't
good
think it's
point.
going to be that easy.
Smaller communities, it's a little
Sure.
easier because yeah. But the other thing is, speaking of clarification, is that home events, or is that also if the next event's a road game, then does the next school be notified that, hey, we had this person? If it's an MHSA policy, then in my mind, it follows to the next event, which could potentially be a road game. So that's another clarification that I would kind of want. But I do agree that, and we're pretty lucky. We don't see a lot of that. And it's been a long time since I've had to remove anybody from an event. But around the state, there's some interesting scenarios that have happened, and not just at high school events, but all levels. And so I know this is just another piece to try to bring awareness to it. And I got to say that I do agree with that, because there's just no place for that when we're trying to teach our kids what it's like to be good sports and to compete and to know how to win and to know how to lose, because that happens too, but how to be gracious in either. So anyway, I agree that something with a little more teeth probably is necessary. All right, and then the final one was a pretty simple one. It's just the physical. What they're looking at doing is right now we have an annual physical for all kids to participate in any of our athletics. You have to get that at, we normally take anything, or we prefer it be after our last school date. What they're looking at now though is let's see. Find my paper here. Got lots of, that's why I left it to one page for you, because there was like 11. So I figured I would save you that. Here we go. So it's the, for an annual sports physical right now, they're good for 1 year. They're looking at extending that to 2 years. So this language would be added into the MHSA handbook, saying that physical examinations conducted on May 1st or after that are valid for the following 2 school years. Physical examinations conducted prior to May 1st are valid only for the remainder of that school year, but then would also be valid for the next entire school year. So I kind of like that, because one thing I will say, physicals are way different than they were in the past. We used to all go into our, he invited all the girls, went into one locker room, and all the boys were in the other locker room. And then we had a mass group of our local doctors come in. You did it before sports started. Not very thorough, probably, and embarrassing at times. But anyway, the physical now, the MHSA has a form that it's quite lengthy, and it's been added to. And part of the reason of it was insurance driven, obviously, but it's to make sure that physicals are more thorough, and to try to find if there is an issue with a student, to try to find that before they actually compete and have something happen. So There's quite a few things on there. And then obviously after COVID hit, it's amazing how more things were added to it. And there's even a mental health component now. So they're trying to turn the annual physical into something that's a little bit more comprehensive with students. And so I don't have a problem with this because, to be honest, part of their rationale is the timing of the comprehensive physical exam occurs between 1 and 3 years, or the timing of that between 1 and 3 years is supported by, and I'm not going to read all of these different medical organizations, lots of acronyms though. And I know one of them is the Association of Medical Pediatric Doctors. There's all kinds of them, but anyway, so I would say the medical field and community says that yes, that you're well within that time frame. It's not an issue. And then also the 2-year physical exam would help alleviate the strain on smaller areas and medical providers in rural areas that typically get a huge rush right before season start. So that was one of their, I know my particular assistant would like that as well because she gets a huge rush before every season too. So this would allow us to track that a little bit easier. And the only reason this is coming through is because, like I said, the medical community says that it's probably fine and wouldn't hurt anything, because that is one thing that they've been very careful about, and that's why the physical has changed to be more comprehensive, to try to get a better evaluative, scenario of every kid. So anyway, I don't have a problem with that either. Like I said, because of the thorough nature of what it's become, I think we're in pretty good shape with that. So I believe that will go pretty easily. We'll pass. Any questions on that? All right. Well, thank you for your time.
Great.
Thank you. Do we need a motion?
You do. Yeah. So that number 5 would be, you're kind of on the fence depending on language, if it's cleaned up or not.
Yeah, I would like to vote yes on that, but like I said, I would just like to clarify a couple of points, and I'm hearing that will probably happen.
Okay. Okay, any other questions or comments, for Mr. Irvin? Okay. If not, I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move to approve agenda item D2 to allow Mark Irvin to vote for Havre High School activities at the MHSA annual meeting.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
It's been moved by Kevin and seconded by Kristen that we allow Mr. Irvin to cast the vote for Havre High School at the MHSA meeting. Does any member of the audience wish to speak to the motion? Any member of the board wish to speak to the motion? All those in favor, raise your hand. Motion passes unanimously.
Mr. Irvin.
I had one little piece of correspondence. I wanted to thank the Little Pony Football Organization for buying us some new chains for the Blue Pony Stadium. The nice set that we had got taken out by a left tackle this year, was not repairable. Mr. Niddens did the best that he could, but he broke it in half and doing the best that he could. So we ordered a new one, and it was very nice of them. We do a lot with them, and they volunteer for us, and we have our older kids help them, and it was just kind of a thank you. They got to play on the field this year at Blue Pony Stadium, which was kind of fun. So just a neat relationship thing, and they were willing to do that. So I just wanted to publicly thank them for that. It was kind of a key.
Awesome. Thank you, Mr. Irvin. Agenda item E1, Mr. Gum.
Yeah, so Havre Public Schools wrapped up the month of December with 1,802 students. So that current enrollment number was still up 8, even though when you look at that enrollment sheet, you'll notice there was a decline from the month previous. However, it's still up 8 total students from a year ago at this time, when you factor out the colony students from that number. So right now, as you can imagine, then we roll into Christmas break, and then following Christmas break. So we've watched now, an influx over this last 2 weeks of students entering Havre Public Schools. So we've had some students coming in. One thing that Holly and I have noticed is we've seen more out of district students now wanting to come into our district. So that's kind of a uniqueness with that. But realistically, when you look at just following the trend pattern. You see that kind of dip through the winter months where you see students exiting, as we just kind of ebbs and flows and follows that similar pattern for the school year. So, but anyway, that's the update on enrollment.
Okay, pt2, the Indian Policy and Procedure Spring Meeting.
Yes, so following the approval of these policies, now we need to move forward. When I was on the phone today with Kara Kurz, who's our rep for the state of Montana from Washington, D.C., she said once your board approves the policies, then you need to just start moving forward in the thought process that they're part of your system now. And as we move into the application phase, you just start moving forward with kind of your next steps in there. And so when I kind of read through the different items that are involved in this, right? So one of them is going to be one of the things that we'll need to do moving forward is disseminating relevant application evaluation program plans and information related to LEA's education programs with notice to the tribe. So that portion's more once we have the application approved. But one of the things we could do this spring would be providing the opportunity for tribes and the parents of the children to provide their views on our LEA's educational programs and activities. So we did provide an opportunity for that in the fall when Katie Marsenko held the parent feedback meeting at Highland Park. So that was one opportunity. We're going to do that again in the spring. And then if you move to policy 3, the LEA will at least annually assess the extent to which Indian children participate on an equal basis with non-Indian children in LEA's educational program and activities. So we can grab that data. The LEA will modify its IPPs if necessary based on results or assessments inputs described in paragraph B of this section or document. And this is where it talks about the policy is that, but then procedure 4, the school board will schedule a school board meeting at least once annually to consult with the tribe and parents of Indian children on the content of the IPPs, equal participation in educational program and activities. So that's where this spring, her recommendation was we could kind of look at like March or April for a time to schedule that. We'll make sure we get all the notices out along with these policies now and just provide a window of opportunity to come in and kind of discuss what we're doing. As you know, this would be our first go round, so it'd probably be minimal compared to as time goes on and years goes on, because then you're also reporting on impact aid and all of the components that go with that. So we'll have a lot of more information moving forward. But if you're okay with that, I'll take a look at the schedule and let you know at the next, probably, let's say maybe at the lunch board meeting when a sufficient time for that would be, if that sounds good to you.
And would we need that to be a separate meeting from one of our regulars? Or can we join them together?
We could join that within that meeting. Yeah, so we'd have a separate component of that.
Okay.
Make a note for end of January meeting. I'll have that scheduled.
Anything else on that one, Brian?
Nope.
Okay. Library variance.
Yes, so I just enclosed the copy of the library variance that Ellery Bressler sent over, just summarizing that we're approved for the next 3 years with this, so which is good news. So it'll expire June 30th of 2027. So that's when we'll need to then resubmit another application for this. Surprisingly, it was a lot bigger process than I thought it would be to, reapply for this. But the good news is if we stay kind of consistent where we're at with numbers, they don't see any issue. There's a larger issue with trying to, all of a sudden hire a half-time librarian, a 0.5, when what we're currently doing works. So, so that was positive. So we got the approval on that. And then, innovative educational program tax credit donation. So, Moses did a fantastic job researching kind of the format that other schools are using with this. He and I sat down, we had some conversations, tried to kind of come up with a game plan. We've pushed out publicly on this on over radio. We've talked about it. It's been out on the website, on Facebook. So we've hit a variety of platforms, as well as Moses this past week made a trip downtown out throughout our community to 19 different entities, just in an effort to try to cast out the information of what this is about. I'll let Moses kind of maybe give you a little stats and figures on this, but he and Kylene tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. when that portal opens, we'll jump on with the donations and try to get those approved for Havre Public Schools. So Moses, do you have any other thoughts?
I want to share with you guys how much we've gotten in donations. As of right now, we have $47,000. Yep. So thank you to all our donors and all our community members.
Now, does that have to go into a specific fund, or are there?
There's a couple of things that you can, guidelines that you can spend the money on.
Well, that's good. I think that's probably one of the better years that we've ever had on that piece. So, with our community be able to take advantage of it. So.
Is
Thank
this
you
that
for all
one?
your work on that.
Is this the one that has the really short window or whatever it was?
Yep.
Correct.
First come, first serve.
Okay, so it's
It
not,
opens tomorrow. Yep.
so they've donated 47,000, but we have to get it
We have to get it in there. Yep.
Approved.
in the system
Yeah.
first. So it's a possible 47.
Possible.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
That's what I couldn't remember if it was the same one or not.
They increased that amount by a substantial amount last year to
They
where
did.
it should be
I
possible.
think it's 6 million now this year.
Oh, so they've
The first year they did it, I believe it closed within minutes.
It was like 5 minutes.
Yes.
Yeah. Yep.
And last year it was open for
It was
days.
6 days.
Yeah.
It was
Okay.
open for 6 days last.
Yeah. So we should I mean,
Yeah.
high probability. Yeah.
apparently I still had trauma from first year.
Yeah.
Kind of one of the nice components I think of this too is then I had different superintendents across the High Line reaching out to me then over the break to say, hey, we hear you got a form, somebody told us you got a form and could we take a look at that and
No.
basically model off that, right? Like which is a good idea, which I think honestly always helping out, right? Then our fellow people up here is a good way to go. But I think the more than we do this, right? Each year you probably become a little more efficient with it. You kind of look and say, hey, what worked? Is there a different approach we could use? So Moses and Holly and I just feel like this is a great start to it. And then we'll just continue to adjust as we move forward with it. But yeah, a positive for sure.
I hate to jump back on you, but what was the variance in the library proposal that you guys sent? And what is the variance that was apart from?
So what if, as soon as you roll over 500 students, like for instance,
Yeah, I'm looking at the actual arm right now. So I
Yep.
see that.
Yep. So once we're over 500 students, then you have to move between 500 and I think it's 1,000 students. You have to have at an additional 0.5 librarian. So we'd have 1.5, which, as Dustin and I've had conversation in terms of how we're able to meet those needs since we're on that low end. We feel pretty confident that the system we have right now, we meet all the needs of our students, so it wasn't an issue. So even though we were over 500, they recommended going through that process because they said, we understand that would be difficult to fill in a 0.5 position.
Gotcha.
So,
You
yep.
were still at 1 then is.
Yep. So we're